Humility makes us thankful. You know, I was talking to one of our congregants the other day, a man who has recently retired after a wonderful professional life, and he just kept saying to me how lucky he has been. He said he has good health, there have been no major traumas in the family, he's had a fine education, financial resources, et cetera, et cetera. He said, you know, if all these good things come to us, it's not because of our own virtue, it's not as though we earned it or deserved it, it's just that we're lucky, he said. I guess the theological term for that might be blessed. We have been greatly blessed. This is the opposite of one who considers himself a self-made man, who believes that he has what he has through his own superiority and hard work. When I hear someone talk like this, I can't help but think of the many people who work so much harder, who work at 2 or 3 low-paying, hard-scrabble jobs, and who still can barely keep body and soul together. No, there is no such thing as a self-made man or woman. We are all needy beyond what we can ever imagine, radically dependent on a whole host of others, both past and present, who give us life. Acknowledging this dependency connects us to other persons, and not just to those we know, but to those whom we will never know, who nevertheless sustain us through their labor. We are also connected inevitably to the other creatures of the earth, to the wondrous multitude of beasts and growing things that this living earth belches forth so extravagantly. You want to develop thankfulness? Just go out into your backyard, pick up a seed, look at a fallen leaf, smell the rain on the grass, and wonder, how can this beauty be? We have always been warned, have we not, about hubris, or overweening pride. Our great literature, David in the Bible, Oedipus Rex, Shakespeare's Macbeth, these classics show the mighty falling when they reach out beyond themselves, when they disregard their limits, or when they have what psychologists would call an inflated ego. Now, here's where things get tricky, because you see, you have to construct a self before you can let that self go. As you grow into adulthood, you have to try yourself out. You have to measure yourself against others. You have to judge and weigh and choose. In other words, you have to construct an ego. You have to become somebody before you can become nobody, or before you lose your ego identification. This reminds me of a story. It seems that several rabbis were repenting in the synagogue during Yom Kippur. They were there kneeling and beating their breast, and they were calling out, "I am nobody, I'm nobody." And then a poor man dressed in ragged clothes came in off the street, and he too knelt down, and he began beating his breast in repentance, saying, "I am nobody, I'm nobody." And at this point, one rabbi nudged another with his elbow and said, "Look who thinks he's nobody." Ego awareness is a given. Our social, even physical survival depends upon this understanding of a self. That is, I am a person, I am this sort of person, and I have a self I can depend on. The spiritual journey, though, is a giving up of that ego identification. It is not, as some may believe, a journey toward perfection of self. Let me say that again. The spiritual journey is not a journey toward perfection of self. So, one might say you spend the first half of your life becoming somebody and the last half becoming nobody. You see, your idea of yourself is a made-up story which came from your parents and from the general culture. If you are willing to acknowledge that story, but not let it rule your life, your natural state is free to shine through. And that natural state is love. Spiritual teacher and author Eckhart Tolle has said, "The meek are the egoless. They are those who have awakened to their true nature as consciousness. They live in a surrendered state." That is an important word, surrendered. They live in a surrendered state and so feel their oneness with the whole and with the source, capital S. Their oneness with the whole and the source. Now, I have to say now that if you have to become somebody before you can be nobody, this spiritual path is more difficult for those of us who have been told that we're nobody. What does being humble mean to a woman who is constantly pictured in the media as a commodity? A woman who still gets less money for doing the same job as a man, although she does most of the domestic work as well after she gets back home from her regular job. And what does humble mean to an African American who may actually have known relatives who were slaves or who were lynched? You know, it hasn't been that long ago when we bought and sold human beings in this country. And what does it mean, this word humble, what does it mean to a gay man who wants to move in a gentle way on this earth but risks being attacked by men who cannot acknowledge their softer side? What does being humble mean to a man without legs, to a mentally ill person, to a girl who has been sexually abused by her father? Oh, well, here is where the sermon gets a little more complicated, doesn't it? Some of us have false stories that we dance to. Stories that tell us we are not good enough. Stories that tell us that others are somebody, but we are not. Those stories are lies. Let me say that again. These stories are lies constructed by the culture and by less than healthy people who gave us these messages. We have to give up these stories, which seem so normal and so comfortable, and allow ourselves to hear a new song. A loving community like this church can help. Tom's announcement about these sustaining circles, that's an important announcement. I would encourage you to join one of our sustaining circles. Being really heard, which is what happens in these small groups, being really heard is a good way to understand your own worth. Being with healthy people can really help. Going to that center where love resides, going to that center in some kind of spiritual discipline, in prayer or meditation or however you do it, can help. When we go to that center over and over again, we begin to find it easier to consider forgiveness. We don't exalt ourselves and deny our failings. We don't find ourselves unworthy either. We just find ourselves as we are, and we're okay. We know that we want to become more loving, more compassionate, more generous, and to do that, we have to go to that hard place called forgiveness. This is one of the gifts of humility. We fall short. Others fall short. And we acknowledge that truth and stand with it and accept it and forgive.